back here for this next session here. So if you remember back, way back when, the camera shuts off after 30 minutes for whatever reason, and I've never been able to figure out how to get that. I need a different type of setup, but whatever. Anyway, so in here, I'm going to cover a couple of things here. Banks are all the same. That's the first one, and I'll maybe touch into looting or something. Anyway, so. And I don't mean looting like the way that most people it's portrayed on the internet, where it's a bunch of people smashing windows and stealing a bunch of shit. Looting starts at the top, and then it works its way down. And your politicians, your political class, and your banker class, and the insurance class, and I mean basically all the people that run this whole scam right here, this whole fake economy nonsense. Okay, those people have been looting for quite a while, and we don't call it looting, but that's what they're doing, and it's being done by pushing the inflation off to you, and so it's theft, but it's theft from the whole country, and because they wear suits. And because they use big words and they hide behind diplomas and all kinds of credentials, fake bullshit credentials, stuff that's just all made up. All this stuff is made up. I can't believe anybody takes any of this shit seriously anymore. Because of all that, a lot of people fall for it. A lot of people, because what they do is they get you to question your own eyes. That's what schools are for. I don't know if you know this or not, but you understand the schools are designed to take perfectly normal, rational human beings, small human beings, okay, and make them see something that isn't there. That's their whole goal. That's the entire business model of a school, is to take a little person and then set them down in front of a teacher, and where they have to obey the teacher, and the teacher is going to explain to them that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. It's not what you're seeing. What you think that you're seeing these people looting, the treasury and looting everything. You think that which you don't understand how finance works and big business and so on. And it's investors and all this nonsense. It's like, you're still printing money to the point of worthlessness. You're still exporting the inflation to the bottom half of the economy. It doesn't change any of that. Okay, it's still theft, right? That's how it is. There's no way around any of that. And understand, none of these people have any argument against this. They don't. If they're straight cornered, there's no argument against anything of what I just said. It's a financial fact. When you print a bunch of money and you shove it into the economy, you create inflation. You don't create more stuff. You just create more dollars, which means that anything that's scarce and desirable, in other words, things like houses, places for people to live, right? That becomes desirable. Those are scarce and desirable. People want to live there. And you artificially shove the prices up. And you've got a whole bunch of boomers that are only too eager to jump in on that bandwagon and say, well, great, let's make it even better and make people pay even more money to live here so that they could never save any money or do anything else. Well, and this is where, and this is where I'm going to be really controversial, I suppose. This is where you're going to get the idea of reparations. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about, for the reparations, I know it's been turned into a race pimp thing. I realize it's been turned into all about race. It's really not. It's really not. It's the American people, okay, that are doing all the work, that do most of the living, the working, and the dying in the community. It's those people saying, "Hold on a second here, you keep ripping us off." Now, we don't know how you're ripping us off, because not many people are going to be as articulate maybe as I am. And I'm not trying to say that I'm anything that I'm not. I'm just telling you that I'm reasonably well articulate, or well spoken rather. Articulate, well, that's the same thing. Anyway, so because of that, I can explain this stuff. And the challenge is that nobody really has an argument against it, right? You can't argue your way out of inflation. It's theft, right? I mean, that's all it is. So when you take a kid and you do effectively the marshmallow test, right? And that's where you get them to start saying, okay, well, I'll get a reward, right? It's the same way you train a dog. Understand? I mean, I train my dog the same way, and you get them to behave a certain way, and then they stop seeing what's right in front of them. That's what schools are designed for, and we're reaching the apex of that now, to the point where younger people, kids they're rebelling against all of that now, because they can't understand how they're getting ripped off, but they know they're being ripped off, because they know it's like, well, again, if you're doing work, which I'm all about that. I'm all about, hey, I'm all about doing work. I work constantly. I mean, for me, it's never ending. But the understanding is that when someone makes a deal with you and they say, okay, hey, listen, if you work here, I'm going to pay you this much money. I'm going to pay you $100 for a day's work, right? And at the end of the day, they hand you $80, and you're like, hold on, you told me $100. Well, yeah, that's fine stuff, but don't think about it too much. It's okay, I mean, it'll be all good. I'll make it up on the back end later on. Most people, if it were that blatant, you would not go back and work there again, right? You would, if it were that upfront, you would probably not do any work for them ever again. You would not show up, right? You would not treat it seriously, and you would call them a criminal, because what would happen is that, well, I mean, in the taxi world, right? It's called felony theft of services. It's called defrauding an innkeeper. You can look all those laws up. I think all 50 states have them, right? If you go to a hotel and you stay at the hotel and then you don't pay your bill, right? It's called defrauding an innkeeper. It's actually a felony to do that, right? So this is the same kind of thing. Remember, put yourself in a business position, right? That you're not an employee. You're a business owner. The business is your life, right? And you're saying, hey, I'll show up and I'll work for this $100. I'm using chicken shit, fiat garbage dollars for this example. And then at the end of the day, the guy says, okay, well, here's $80. Like, no, sir, that's not what we agreed to. We agreed to 100. By the way, I mean, I've known people who've done this kind of stuff to people, right? And yeah, I don't associate with them. I want nothing to do with that. I want nothing to do with them, because it actually happened to friends of mine, where they worked all day, and then the deal was, and then the deal changed, and then it turned into, well, you took a break, and you had 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I'm not kidding. That's exactly what she did. And it's like, hold on. I mean, they got all the work done. Everything was done as asked, and and everything. And it's like, you're kind of nickel and diming somebody to death. And I do mean, like, I don't mean that these are friends of mine, and I know their work ethic. They didn't sit around and do nothing all day. They were out there, in this case, literally in the fields, like an actual farm in the fields, doing the stuff. And then she kind of hosed them on this, and then it really wasn't the deal. It turned into a, well, it's not exactly what I said kind of thing, and it went back and forth. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, how are you going to treat that seriously? How could you? You couldn't, right? Most people would go, no, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going back. I wouldn't, right? You wouldn't. Nobody would. Well, that's how inflation works. You're agreeing to work for a certain amount of money, with the understanding that money is going to be able to buy you something, right? Remember, we talked about this. Men don't work for money, in the abstract sense. They work for money for what the money will buy. If the money doesn't buy anything, they kind of stop working. They don't take it seriously. And that's what ends up happening. So what ends up happening is that as you continue on, your idea is that, well, okay, if I save my money, then I'm going to be able to save for my retirement, right? Which is why I'm going to put this little note up here on the board. I'm going to save for my retirement. And this is that marshmallow test, right? It's never, think about it this way. The way that the government operates, the way that banks operate, it's always in the future, right? When you get something you want. I see lots of people push this idea of delayed gratification. I'm all about delayed gratification. I'm all about that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to delay it, and you're going to tell somebody, yeah, hey, I'll perform. In other words, I'm going to give you that $100, right? Then that means you have to actually make good on that. What's happening right now is a whole bunch of banks and a whole bunch of government and a whole bunch of companies, that those two institutions, banks and governments, what they haven't done is they've been supporting a whole bunch of businesses, and these businesses are all maxing out, and they're all going to run out. They're not going to be able to do any of the stuff that they claimed to their employees that they were going to do. You're seeing this happen in France right now. I'm not making the arguments like, well, but 62 versus 64. Well, again, same problem here. If I did a deal with you and I said I'm going to pay $100, then I said, $40, close enough. No, it's not. It's not close enough. You're ripping me off. That's what it is. So what you're seeing in the world now, right, is a whole bunch of all of this shit collapsing. And it's for very legitimate financial reasons. It's not about Biden. Biden's just a Alzheimer's fucking patient that got shoved into office because, well, I mean, I can't really say why. I mean, because I'll get banned, but honk, right? I mean, it's whatever. Anyway, so, and it's not because Trump. It's not because it's like, dude, you guys got to get past this. There's legitimate economic reasons to question all of the fraud and bullshit that you're seeing. Okay. So because of all of this, you're like, well, but what does it have to do with all the banks? Well, everything I'm talking about has everything to do with the banking, because what's coming next with the unemployment aspect and everything is going to be people being late on payments and people, not being able to, they're not going to be able to protect their credit scores or anything. And this is what's going to end up happening. And by the way, I mean, as a business owner, I've had a credit score in the 400s. I've also had credit score up in the 820s, right? And I've noticed really no difference personally, or professionally. I've noticed no difference. In terms of like, if you go to the bank and you say, hey, I've got an 800 credit score and I want to borrow some money to do a business, right? The bank says, fuck off. If you go in there with a 420 credit score and they say, hey, I want to start this business, man. And they're like, fuck off. They don't care, right? They're not going to do any actual deals. Banks don't do deals like that anymore, right? We talked about this a long time ago, but if you're some boomer douche who says, well, I want to open up a burger place or something like that, and you go into the bank and say, give me some money, I need to borrow $500,000 for a burger place, and they say, okay, that's great. Do you own a house? Well, yeah, I do. Here's this house here. Oh, it's a $2 million boomer house. Oh, well, yeah, here's $500,000, no problem. They're lending money on the house. They don't give a fuck up the business. They don't care. They don't care what you're doing with the money for. You could go take the money and shove it up your ass. You could go set it on fire for all they care. They don't care. What they're going to do is they're just going to use that as leverage against your house. Retarded chimpanzees. I've said this a long time ago. Can do that deal. I mean, you don't need to be anybody special to do a deal like that. I mean, any retarded banker, they're all equally retarded in my eyes, but any of them can do a stupid brain dead deal not like that. So, there's this idea like, oh my God, I got to protect my credit scores. No, actually, I got to tell you this, you got to protect your future. Okay. Because the banks aren't going to loan money anymore. That's gone. That's gone. I mean, look at the way they're treating cars right now. They're not doing car loans. They're not flooring inventory anymore. Capital One pulled out of it. There's a bunch of their banks that are going to follow suit with this. Car lots are going to start going under. Like, again, you're seeing an implosion of the number of people that there is out there to sell shit to. Okay, that's what you're seeing happen. And just throwing the borders open and flooding the country with a bunch of migrants isn't going to solve that either. It's just not. It'll solve it in maybe pockets of the country, little pockets here and there, maybe. Maybe it'll give you to provide some cheap labor, which does wonders, of course, for the American population that are like going, hold on a second here. I mean, I kind of need to make money here to support my family. I'm an American. I was here first, right? I mean, we were here. I was born here. We're doing all, and it's like all of a sudden you're telling Americans to go fuck themselves, so that way you can bring in a bunch of shit sticks from other countries. I'm nothing against those people. Right? I mean, hey, they're great people, but like, why are you bringing them here to no, there's Americans that need to deal with that now. I'm sorry to be blunt about this, but fucking Christ, man, at a certain point, you have to say, hold on, dude, look, enough's enough. We kind of have some problems right now, right here in this country. The idea is that, well, no, we're going to bail ourselves out of this. You're not fixing this. I'm just going to tell you, I think I mentioned this in another video a little while back. You're not going to fix this. You're not going to fix any of this. What the banks are terrified of, the banks and the politicians both are terrified of, is that you're going to figure this shit out. You're going to figure out everything that I'm explaining to you. You're going to figure it all out. And then you're finally going to dig out that stupid goddamn AR-15, lock and load, and get it ready to fucking go. That's what they're afraid of. That's what they're terrified of. Is that you're going to figure this shit out, and and then you're going to do the first logical thing, which is stop paying credit cards. Like, why? Why would you pay it? It's unsecured debt. Why would you pay it back? Well, but credit score. Who gives a fuck? They're not going to lend you any money anyway. There's like 6 credit card issuers in the entire country. The world record holder for most credit cards owed or owned, or most credit cards to one guy, was some guy in California, and he had like 1,400 credit cards. You have to look it up. I think it was something like this, 1,400 or 400. It was a lot. It was like this. It was like a shoebox full of credit cards, and that doesn't exist anymore. Like you can't even get that anymore. Like that kind of stuff doesn't even happen any longer. There aren't even that many banks, I don't think, in this country that issue credit cards that are the actual issuer. The actual issuer. Remember, you always have to look at the fine print. When you fill out that Shell Visa card, the Shell Visa card is underwritten by Synchrony or Citibank or whatever. It's always a handful of banks that do all that. Pretty much everything else is it's farmed out to them. Okay, so car loans, like, well, I don't know, man. I got to tell you, I mean, I'm watching this, and it's like, well, I mean, what are they going to do with all these used cars? What are they going to do with all these cars? I drive around all the time, and I see the guys, taking the cars down south, right? They got the chain of cars. Most of you aren't going to see this because you maybe don't travel enough. I see it all the time. You've got 3 cars, one guy driving a car, and then there's 2 of them in tow right behind him. Bang, bang. And what they're doing is they're taking those cars down to like South America. They're driving them all the way to South America for parts. And they're going to strip them all. And that's what they're going to do with all of them. This is... For those of you that are like, well, but it sounds like what the picture you're painting, Axel, is going to be this like third world shithole. Like, yeah, that's kind of what's coming because of this. Because what you've done is they're trying to prop all of this up. They're trying to continue to prop up a Ponzi scheme that should have collapsed a long time ago, back in 2008. Is actually when this all should have collapsed. All of this should have gone right down the drain, started over, and then you would have had people that would have been, well, first of all, 15 years younger, right? I mean, your average boomers would have been in their 50s, early 50s at the time. So we could have actually had a real economy after that. Instead, we decided to pump this up even more and make it even worse, right? Because nobody wants to take the hit. Nobody wants to take the L. I've said this for a long time. Nobody wants to have a real economy, because if you had a real economy, you'd have tons of banks failing. You'd also have not just banks failing. You'd have tons of big mega companies failing everywhere. You'd have commercial real estate getting its asses handed to it. You'd have commercial real estate at 50 cents a foot per year. I didn't stutter when I said that. You'd have houses for sale for $2,000. Seriously, like that's not an insane number if you understand just how inflated and how ridiculous this market is. It's crazy. It's why, if you look at, like, you see the same videos, right? A whole bunch of homeless people go into a Walmart or something. They steal everything and they run out, and nobody really stops them. They're like, "Oh my God, it's because the city told them not." No, it's not because of any of that. Nobody owns anything, right? If you went into a Korean convenience store, right, where the owner's there and probably armed, it isn't a question of does he have a gun. It's how many guns does he have, probably on him. Yeah, I noticed that those kind of lootings don't usually take place in those places, right? I've noticed that. I mean, I don't, I would never do something like that. If I owned a convenience store, I would be armed, and so would all my staff. In fact, it would be in the handbook, right? Well, that kind of thing doesn't happen at small businesses. It only happens at gigantic mega companies. It's where, in general, I mean, obviously there's the stragglers out there, but in general, most cases, the vast majority of these cases, it's all big mega corporate shit, right? It's your Walgreens or Walmarts, or it's just big corporate crap where that kind of stuff happens, because nobody there really owns anything. They don't have anything really at stake. And they really don't. Like, I mean, put yourself in that situation. Are you going to take a potential bullet for, because someone's stealing, an iPad? Not if it's not yours. I mean, whatever. Well, but it's wrong. I don't care if it's wrong. it can be wrong. You can be right about all you want. But when push comes to shove, are you going to put yourself in that position? No, most people are not. They're not going to put themselves in that kind of situation. What they're going to do is they're going to say, man, this is really horrible. They're going to video it and they're going to get a bunch of likes on Twitter. And that's what they're going to do. They're not going to jump in and say, oh my God, I'm going to solve all of this. I'm going to be the crusader who's going to show up and like, dude, no, you're not going to do that. You're not. It's not yours. It's not your. Now, if it was your property, right? What would you do if it was your property? Well, now that's a different story entirely, isn't it? You'd be a lot more willing to go defend it and say, hey, I'm not going to let you impoverish me, especially for those of you out there who understand insurance. Right, who've had to deal with insurance companies like I have. I mean, I've dealt with insurance companies a lot. And anyone who says, well, the insurance companies make you whole. No, they don't. They do everything they can to not pay you. They do everything they can to make you to wear you down. And you're like, oh my God, I guess I'll take that settlement and just move on with my life. No, seldom do you ever run into an insurance company that actually makes you legitimately whole unless you're a big enough company and you've got deep enough pockets to sue them into submission, because that's what it takes. So, and then of course, then you have to make sure that you have the right political connections to make sure that you can get, the right trial and the right judge on the case. I mean, it's all political. It's all bullshit. So that said, it's like, yeah, you're going to get, maybe you get your insurance money. Yeah, but you got a $5,000 deductible or $15,000 deductible, depending on what kind of business you have. You may have a $50,000 deductible, depending on your business. So you've got to deal with that. And most people who are in business, okay, those of us who've actually done this shit, once again, I'm back to this again. I'm back to hammering this. Those of us who've actually done this stuff, okay, we don't want to have to actually deal with an insurance company, because we know that we're going to spend more time and money trying to get them to pay the fucking claim, right? So we have a vested interest in protecting all that. That's what's completely missing at all giant mega corporate everything. It doesn't make any difference what it is. I don't care what it is. They say, well, but those companies are big because they served more people. No, they're big because banks and the government gave them permission to be big. And the reason that actually happened was because they gave a bunch of politicians a bunch of money and lobbied for a bunch of extra shit. That's all that happened. Okay, that's reality. Or the bank backed them, figuring that, well, okay, yeah, this company here has the best chance to actually pay us back, kind of. And so we're going to give them a bunch of money, and then we're not going to give any money to these other guys because they're going to compete. That's all that happened. That's really all that happened. You don't have when you get to a certain level. And then, of course, you have shareholders. Like, oh, I'm going to have the shareholders. Like, yeah. What if none of that money came in? What if you had to pay cash for all of it, right? What if you did? What if you had to grow your business along with everybody else and you had to pay cash for all of it? There was no lending for anybody. What if that were the case? How big would you be? Probably not very big. In fact, because you run out of time. And before too long, you're like, man, I'm working my ass off, and I've been working for 25 years. Dude, I'm going to retire. And I'm going to go do something else, And by the way, that's what retirement, I meant to mention this stuff. What retirement has nothing to do with age. Retirement has to do with you saying, hey, look, I've made enough. I've kind of caught my limit, right? Whatever that is, that's subjective. That's up to you. But I'm going to go do stuff that I want to go do now, right? I've made money. I've got my house. I built my house. I've got my family and stuff. I'm going to take my money and I'm going to go do things that, like the whole point of working isn't to spend your whole life working, right? I don't know where this came from. I say this objectively. I don't know where this came from. The whole point of working is to get to the point where you don't have to work as much. Not to retire and sit around and watch the grass grow. Come on. That's just stupid. Let's sit around and be old people. No. That's not what a retirement is. That's what retirement has been turned into. Idea here where, if you work all the way for me, for my company for 50 years, then I'll give you a bunch of money and you can sit around and do nothing all day long. You could buy an RV and go visit the grandkids or something like that, some horse shit like that. I'm like, dude, that's not, no. Retirement was that once you got all your work done, you could go do what you wanted to do, right? That's retirement. You take the surplus money that you had because you used your energy and you made more than you needed, strictly speaking, to survive, which that's becoming harder and harder to do. Even for people in the upper middle class, it's getting harder for them to do because you're propping up this bullshit system. And so what would happen is that you would retire, and then you could go do, with the understanding that you would work, and then you could go do what you wanted to do. That's it. It's really that simple. So all of this said, now that we've kind of gone all over the place with all of this, as you see all of this continue to collapse, then you're going to see a bunch of folks trying to figure out how they're going to maintain, their existence. Well, this is where you're going to see, we talked about this a long time ago, but you're going to see the decision between morality, whatever the hell that means anymore nowadays, and survival. All right, that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with people having to make that decision. This is going to be interesting, if for no other reason, from an outside observer's perspective. It's going to be interesting to watch this because we all know that people are going to end up choosing survival, which is why you're seeing all the looting right now. That's what they're choosing. They're choosing to do what works for them. They can't figure out any other way to do it, so they're just doing it what they see their politicians doing, what they see the bankers doing, what they see everybody doing. And you could say, like, well, no, that's not how the system works. Like, dude, I'm in the system, right? I say this. I mean, like, I am an employer. I've done all of this stuff for real in the real world using my own goddamn money. Okay, not somebody else's money. Using my money, my credit, all, my name, all that kind of stuff. I've done all this shit, and I have yet to see this not be the case. Just watching all this. I'm not condoning any of this, by the way. Just understand. Before you haul off and say that I'm condoning this behavior, I'm not condoning any of this. I'm not condemning either. I'm just saying, like, look, this is part of. It's like, those the physics things and little marbles. You go. Like that. I'm not condoning or condemning any of this. This is the physics portion of this whole idea. It's like, well, you have to expect a reaction, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you keep ripping people off for a long period of time, eventually they get pissed and then they start ripping you off, right? We talked about that, I think, briefly before, but it's like, this is going to happen. Now, how would you create a system where this kind of thing didn't happen? Well, you wouldn't inflate the currency to worthlessness. That's for starters. That's obvious right there. You wouldn't tax people into oblivion, right? You wouldn't be taxing their property. You wouldn't be trying to take every bleeding penny from them. You wouldn't want to be doing that. You would want to leave people as alone as possible and let them live their lives. That would be the solution to this. That would be the way to go about not creating the circumstances that are causing what's inevitably coming. Okay, and it's inevitable. It's just how these things these things work. I'm not judging this. Understand? I'm really not. I'm not judging what any of this behavior. I'm not judging what you do for a living. I'm not judging any of this stuff. I'm not judgmental at all. I get the luxurious position from a physicist perspective of saying, well, I'm not judging this, I'm just watching it happen. And could this be prevented? Absolutely, this could be prevented, but not the way you're going about it. No, you'd have to be willing to take the loss. The people who caused this would have to be willing to take the loss, and none of them are going to do it. They're going to point fingers. They're going to do it. A lot of them because they don't know any better. You get these third and fourth generation trust fund kids. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They really don't. A bunch of these people in Congress, these people are morons. They have no idea what they're doing. There's a handful of malevolent people, but most of them are just idiots. They don't know what the hell. None of these people know what they're doing with any of this stuff. So, it's like, all right, well, continue on, I guess. But it's going to work until it doesn't. And that's really kind of where we're at on that. So, hope this attitude session helps.